Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Please continue to enjoy your breakfast as we start our coffee series. But good morning. I'm Brigadier General Jack Haley, U.S. Army retired and a soldier for life. Welcome to the Association of United States Army's Gordon R. Sullivan Conference and Event Center. Well, if it's March, it must be Army budget time. And we're excited this morning to continue with our coffee series, which epitomizes the AUSA mission to educate, inform, and connect. And we're honored to have with us this morning to discuss the Army FY25 budget requests, Major General Mark Bennett, Major General Joe Hilbert, and Miss Kirsten L. Taylor. First, I'd like to thank our 4-star sponsors, General Dynamics and Leonardo DRS, and our 2-star sponsors, Leidos and Northrop Grumman, for their support of the coffee series. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support of AUSA over the years. Let's give them a round, please. We can't do these events without our great industry partners. And if you're interested in learning more about becoming a sponsor, please speak with our team at registration. We appreciate the presence of the general officers and command sergeants major joining us this morning as well. It's always great to have you join us. And I'd also like to acknowledge any congressional staff that are here with us today. Your efforts on behalf of the Army, soldiers, and families is greatly appreciated. AUSA's Government Affairs Directorate develops our congressional focus areas. And every year since I've been with AUSA, our #1 focus area has been to pass on-time appropriations and authorizations. And with the deadline approaching this week, we here at AUSA cannot stress enough how critical this is to national security. Now it gives me great pleasure to welcome this prestigious panel to AUSA. Major General Mark Bennett became the 32nd Director of Army Budget and the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Financial Management and Comptroller on 3 August 2021. He's completed a number of assignments and deployments, including South Korea, Egypt, and Afghanistan. And during his first tour in the Pentagon, he supported the Army and nation's response to the 9/11 attacks. Prior to joining us here to discuss the last few Army budget requests, he served as the Commanding General of the U.S. Army Financial Management Command. Major General Joe Hilbert serves as the Director of Force Development for the Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff, G8. Prior to assuming this position, he served as the Commanding General for 7th Army Training Command at Grafenwehr, Deputy Commanding General for the 3rd Infantry Division at Fort Stewart, Georgia, and in a wide variety of positions throughout the United States and Europe. And Kirsten Taylor serves as the Chief Financial Officer for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, including program executive offices and direct reporting units. She serves as the co-chair, I'll use quotes there, Kirsten, the co-chair representative for the Equipping and Sustainment Program Evaluation Groups, the PEGs, which manages the resources that enable the development, procurement, and sustainment of weapon systems and equipment for warfighters. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to our distinguished panel.
Jack, thank you for the warm introduction. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us here this morning. I hope you had a chance to catch some of the basketball games over the weekend to get your brackets all set, as well as a chance to go see the cherry trees with the cherry blossoms right now that are at peak this week as well. And as he mentioned, yep, it's that time again for the Army budget as a part of the March Madness routine that we do. And we're very, very proud to roll out our FY25 fiscal year budget. On our first chart, you'll note, again, it's fully compliant with the Fiscal Responsibility Act, our budget. You may have heard that the DoD budget only was up 0.9%. The Army budget goes up about 0.2%, and we'll look at that shortly. Using the GDP deflator, the inflation rate used to build the 25 request did exceed 2%, so you can see we really do have negative real growth with that. In building the request, we did make deliberate decisions to optimize our resources in this fiscally constrained environment. And our budget is consistent with the Secretary of Defense priorities listed here. In defending the nation, we funded unit readiness to meet the directed readiness tables as well as our global force management allegation plan requirements. We also have 22 combined training center rotations, and that's similar to last year, that include 2 National Guard rotations, as well as 2 in the Pacific, 1 in Hawaii and 1 in Alaska. Taking care of people, we funded our personnel accounts to take care of that pay raise at 4.5%, the 3.9% increase in basic allowance for housing, as well as 3.4% for basic allowance for subsistence. We also put more money towards our childcare and our quality of life initiatives, most importantly in housing and barracks, and we'll talk a little bit about that shortly as well. We continue to fund the transformation of the Army as well in our personnel area with a recruiting transformation that we'll spend some moments talking about. The last SecDef priority, succeeding through teamwork. The Army is indispensable in building relationships with our allies and our partners. We increased our Pacific Pathways program this year with a significant increase in exercise funding, and we continue our European exercises as well. We are committed to being a reliable partner around the world stage. Next chart. In the aggregate, you can see the Army's total budget is $185.9 billion. That's $429 million more than the 24 request. Again, that's 0.2%. For the third year in a row, I will note that this is all base program funding. There is no supplemental funding in any of the figures that I have in this presentation unless I otherwise let you know that. Our military personnel accounts grew $821 million, again, to take care of those pay raises in basic pay, housing, and subsistence. The O&M account decreased $640 million from the FY24 requested levels, roughly 0.9% lower. Again, we fund directed readiness table requirements as well as those global force management allocation plan requirements. We also did account for the planning assumptions of the Army force structure changes, which we'll talk briefly. In our procurement and RDT&E accounts, also known as RDA, RDT&E appears to decrease when compared to the FY24 levels. However, what you will see is a shift from research, development, test, and evaluation into procurement. Okay, so that's a good news thing. In the Army's 25 request, we increased investments in enduring platforms, as well as upgrading industrial-based facilities for next-generation ammunition and ground-based vehicles. And lastly, the Army's 25 military construction and Army family housing budget is up $1.1 billion from the 24 request. This supports a total of 45 projects across the total Army, including 9 barracks projects, as well as 3 child development centers and 1 youth center. The Army is very appreciative of the Congress's support as we continue to work towards improving our soldier and family quality of life. And our next chart. Transforming our recruiting enterprise. You may have heard of our multi-year headwinds that we're facing in the recruiting environment. We have taken action to change how we recruit, who we recruit, and who is doing the recruiting. We believe we are fundamentally reshaping how we recruit our soldiers, professionalizing the workforce and creating new specialties with a 42 Tango, as well as a warrant officer career field of a 420 Tango to get that technical expertise. Expanding our focus to high school seniors and recent graduates. Improving how we select our recruiters. And we're also elevating the recruiting command to a 3-star command that is a direct report to the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Secretary of the Army. We are also continuing programs that we've had some really great success with, to include our Future Soldier Prep course, where we've graduated almost nearly 17,000 soldiers. 25% of our soldiers are selecting duty of station, their top choice for an incentive. That's an interesting thing to note. They're getting to pick where they get to serve, and that's what their incentive that they'd like to take. And also increasing our bonus programs and the soldier referral program. Recently, the Army also announced its total Army analysis. The Army had a force structure of 490K with an authorized end strength of 445,000 in the 24 NDAA. This imbalance we had to bring down by 32,000 positions, but it'll also allow us to add 7,500 authorizations to bring 30 new or upgraded capabilities into our force. Over time, we will build the end strength back up to fully man that structure. Next chart. Our Secretary, Christine Wormuth, has made a very significant barracks improvement signature effort. The Army will make a sizable investment to address barracks and improve quality of life. We plan to spend an average of $2.1 billion over the Future Years Defense Program to construct, repair, and sustain all of our barracks. We have 9 new barracks projects funded in fiscal year 25 and have funded barracks sustainment, that's the repair of those facilities and maintaining them, to 100% of the requirement for the first time in recent history. We're also taking actions to reduce our deficit, prevent deterioration of our inventory, and improve the oversight of our barracks. We've included $15 million to hire 75 civilian barracks managers. Again, that professional workforce to help manage those facilities for us. And we also plan to leverage the new NDAA authorities to use restoration and modernization funding in our O&M account to fully replace failing barracks. That alleviates the need for more military construction project funding. Next chart. Shifting into research, development, test, and evaluation. Again, that decrease of 1.7 reflects that move from RDT&E into production, as well as reshaping and optimizing our R&D efforts. I'll give 3 examples. Transition of the lower tier air and missile defense sensor system from prototyping to production, where we plan to produce 4 low-rate initial production sensors. The long-range hypersonic weapon, we have a reduction there in $363 million of RDT&E that will pay partially the $587 million increase in missiles procurement. And the XM-30 combat vehicle, formerly the optionally manned fighting vehicle, changed from a down select of 3 vendors in phase 4 to 2 vendors, generating a less RDT&E needed of $492 million. The 25 RDT&E request includes $2.8 billion, or roughly 1.4% Army TOA for science and technology efforts. You will note when you look at those lines, it looks like there's a much bigger decrease between fiscal year 23, the enactment there. That is because the congressional ads totaling close to $2.2 billion are included in that 23 column. So just an awareness for reference. We do have an eye towards new technologies that will integrate across the force, as well as increasing our overmatch capability. We plan to continue efforts to enhance lethality, mobility, survivability, and integrated communications, with an emphasis on RDT&E investments to include in the future long-range aviation advanced development, $1.2 billion. Continues the building of engineering and manufacturing development, or EMD, prototypes 1 through 6, and begin to manufacture FLRAA's EMD prototypes 7 and 8. Army Integrated Air and Missile Defense, $602 million for agile software development and integration testing, requirements verification of that software build, operational testing, integration activities for integrated fire capabilities, and planned Pacific architecture. Maneuver Short-Range Air Defense, $316 million for product development, initial operational testing, product improvement tasks, and includes support for product management, test and evaluation, and engineering and technical support. Moving on to procurement, our 25 request continues to get after key and essential equipment that supports our Army modernization strategy aligned with the National Defense Strategy. It's roughly $1 billion higher than the 24 requests that you see up there. We continue investments in long-range fires, air defense, and deep sensing capabilities with key procurements of $493 million for precision strike missiles and $963 million for PAC-3 missiles, as well as $1.2 billion for guided MLRS missiles, and on top of $517 million for the LRIP sensors for the LTAMDS-D that I mentioned previously. There are additional investments in enduring programs for aviation and ground combat systems, such as $716 million for 10 CH-47 helicopters. That includes 4 MH-47 variants and 6 Block II variants, $768 million for 24 UH-60s, and $571 million for 31 H-64 Echo models, and $887 million for 30 Abrams SEP V3 tanks. Organic industrial base investments total over $1.9 billion in the base and include restoration and modernization and recapitalization, as well as production-based support efforts. While not reflected in the funding you see here, the Army does thank Congress for their support with supplemental funding that has supported our organic industrial base and essential equipment and munitions requirements. We did factor that into our 25 request submission, and we look forward to continuing to working with Congress on our current FY24 base and supplemental appropriations. In my last chart, we talked about total Army analysis and the need to field new capabilities as we continue our transformation. This chart displays some of the systems which we will field or develop in FY25. Missiles programs, counter small UAS, and the next generation squad weapon will see either first unit equipped or will get prototype deliveries. We'll continue to invest in programs that are critical for the Pacific focus, including long-range hypersonic weapon, the mid-range capability, as well as some systems which will be critical to any theater, including the tactical network and ground vehicles. As a reminder, last year we sought multi-year procurement authority for the GMLRS as well as our PAC-3 MSC you see in the lower right, and this budget assumes approval of that proposal and continues the savings we estimated and provides a signal to industry of our need to encourage their continued investment and commitment. Another example of why we need the passage of our FY24 appropriations. Within the last month, the Army rolled out changes in its aviation portfolio, truncating the FARA aircraft program and reinvesting in the CH-47 Block II Chinook, moving it into production. Additionally, we are investing in the Black Hawk Improvement Program and increasing investments to accelerate our unmanned aerial reconnaissance capability using a future tactical UAS as well as air-launched effects. All the associated changes with our recent announcement are reflected in the budget submission. And my last chart in closing, I want to reiterate what you've heard about our need for stable and predictable funding. We're hopeful that we'll see an appropriation bill this week, and this is 6 months already into the fiscal year. Once we do get it, we're going to have to work with our commands and turn it right around in our mid-year review. Begin preparation for our update to the Omnibus Reprogramming Action for its submission to the Congress. We also request urgent passage of the supplemental bill. For the Army, it's critically important. We've got $3.1 billion in the supplemental to invest in the industrial base, to increase production of 155 ammunition, as well as our Patriot production. We're also seeking portions of the $18 billion of the bill to replenish weapons and equipment that we have already provided to Ukraine. The Army has been the biggest contributor of this equipment, and we want to replace that inventory. Lastly, we've been cash flowing support to Ukraine as well as our enhanced presence in CENTCOM with response to the Israeli conflict and our operations to support the Department of Homeland Security at the border. We request an urgent act on both the base and the supplemental bill. The FY25 budget with the supplemental funding the FY25 budget fully funded will provide the Army what it needs to do what the nation's asked it to do while we take care of our soldiers, civilians, and their families. We look forward to your questions with my two teammates here, assistants as well. Thank you.
Hi, Dan Shear from Inside Defense. Thanks so much for doing this. I wanted to ask, in the absence of a supplemental, what does the Army need to do in terms of, you all have all of these requests for munitions buys in the supplemental. There's like $560 million for UAS funding for CENTCOM. If you don't get the supplemental, do you have to do a reprogramming? What mechanism do you use to get that money in the absence of a supplemental?
No, thanks for asking. The strains on the Army are significant with the cash flowing issue that you mentioned there. That's independent of the replacement of the ammunition that you're talking about there. The replacement of that is an option we could consider. We'll first need to see our FY24 enactment to determine what we would be able to consider that with. We still, again, are looking forward to the urgent passage of that supplemental funding because the bills are significant that I listed there. Much more than we get in transfer authority from the Congress to be able to reprogram. So we would have to factor that in as well while working with our Air Force and Navy counterparts who have needs to use that transfer authority as well. So,
and if you do have to use that transfer authority, how would that have sort of a ripple effect on just programs that are in the FY25 budget? Like what would be sort of put most at risk or delay?
Again, can't really address that specifically without knowing which programs we would look to go after to do that. So, but something we would have to do, absolutely, and factoring that in to determine what we would need to do in terms of that reprogramming actions that we may need to take. We have had recent ones with the Rapid Acquisition Authority, similar transfer authority doesn't count against our transfer authority, where we've reprogrammed funding in to meet some urgent needs to go after some counter UAS capabilities, as an example.
General Bennett, General Hilbert, and Ms. Taylor, thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Mark Hall. I'm with the association. I'd like to ask a little bit about modernization, if I may. Could you comment, please, on how the FY25 budget will help enable the Army's modernization plan? The modernization priorities have been in place for some years now. It shows great consistency and stability. And perhaps you could also comment on, within the modernization plan, the network. That when General George has met with us, he said that the network is his number one priority. So if you could comment a little bit about modernization with respect to the 25 budget, that'd be very helpful. Again, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.
So I think I mean, you see it throughout the budget on the, as far as the modernization priorities, all the investments, everything from the counter UAS systems that you see in there, and in the RDT&E going into things like high power microwave, high power lasers, but also in fielding equipment for forces inside the TAA that'd be upcoming, MSHORAD, for example, as well as modernizing the ABCT. As far as the network goes, I mean, if you look at just our investment in CJAD C2, you're talking about $3 billion across a bunch of different portfolios in there, as well as investments in the unified network operations that gets us closer to zero trust, and then down and in the different programs inside the command and control portfolio that lead to that C2 Next that General George mentioned.
Hi, Meredith Roten from Janes. Thank you for doing this. I wanted to ask about the cross-functional team top lines. I know the Army has several categories of those and just added the contested logistics CFT. Can you say, is there an increased kind of presence for that in the fiscal 25 request compared to last year? And will we start seeing significant amounts of investment in that this year, or will that be something for 26? Thank you.
I think on the while Mark grabs the green book of knowledge there, I think on the cross-functional teams, the way that I look at them, as far as, I don't necessarily view the cross-functional teams as investment specifically in those teams, but in the projects and the capabilities that they are leading the Army toward. So Mark mentioned the long-range hypersonic weapons, the MRC capability, investments in PRISM, coming out of the cross-functional team for long-range precision fires. Certainly on the cross-functional team for soldier, you see investments in IVAS, the next generation squad weapon that was referenced up there on the slide, right? So you see continued progress in those cross-functional teams across all of them, to include even in the aviation cross-functional team with investments into FLRAA, the sustained investment there. So while it doesn't necessarily answer the direct question about investments in the CFTs themselves, I think down and in you'll see the continued progress in each of the cross-functional teams for the investments in the portfolios that they represent. As far as the cross-functional team for logistics, we just stood that up last year, as you're aware. They as they are taking over part of that portfolio, you'll see the investment in the maneuver support vessel light that'll purchase one a year in the 25 budget, and then continued RDT&E and MSV heavy. As well as, I think, in 25, what you'll see coming out of that cross-functional team is grabbing on to capabilities inside the logistics portfolio to see where we need to invest to modernize in our logistics, or the contested logistics space.
Real quick, to address your funding the question to it as well. It's down just under $500 million. That does not include the contested logistics. I suspect if I peeled the onion on this, I would see a lot of that transition from RDT&E into procurement and out of the hands of the cross-functional teams and into a program manager, and that's the reason for that. So we can give you greater detail if you've got a specific question, but it's at about $14.9 billion in 25.
Gentlemen, good morning. Rob Patrick from ATI. We do the titanium armor for Abrams. You mentioned XM30 down select. You're building M10 Booker. You talked about the Abrams in the budget. Could you comment a bit on the strategy for ground vehicle procurement? Based on what you're learning in Ukraine, I think there's still a need for ground vehicles to hold the ground. How is the Army thinking about that? And what do you see for potential future FMS for the ground vehicles that you're building? Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't think we've moved away from the strategy of modernizing half a BCT a year. And you see that in both the investments in AMP, modernizing the Bradley fleet, the SEPV4 on the Abrams. You see RDT&E going into the M1E3. That's where we moved PROC from Abrams into the RDT&E for M1E3 as part of that modernization effort. So I don't think that it is, I think we've been pretty steady in the need for ground forces based off of what we've seen in Ukraine, and in the need to modernize the ground forces we have based off of the lessons learned there. So.
Okay, this is for the panel. Can you give us some examples of where the Army reinvested the funding from the FARA decision in FY25?
All right. So the reinvestment went to our CH-47 helicopter platform, as well as FTUAS, which is the Future Tactical Unmanned Aircraft Systems, and then Black Hawk Product Improvement Program, which is RDT&E funding.
Good morning. Hi, good morning. Nikolai Sukarev from Inside Defense. I wanted to ask about the M10 Booker. It's my understanding that the white paper released by the Army last month did not mention the M10 Booker. This was all laid out in a CRS report. Can you tell me what is the plan for the M10 Booker as it relates to the force outline in the white paper? Thanks.
Are you speaking specifically to the Secretary's white paper regarding the TAA 2529? Yeah, while not specifically called out, the Booker formations are in that TAA to 2529. For the 25 budget, we'll procure 33 of those vehicles. And I believe the TAA's got three. Yeah, thanks, sir. I had to dial a friend there. 82nd, 101st, and 10th Mountain. I joked with him earlier. I said, sir, I'm going to call on you while I'm up there. You know, I got the G3 of the Army right here. So that was not planned, but yeah. So while not specifically mentioned, it's absolutely a part of it.
The panel touched on this a little bit, but could you elaborate on what the Army sees as the areas of risk in the FY25 budget?
Sure, I'll take that on. The flat budget and basically continuing our modernization as well as meeting all our readiness requirements continues to strain the Army. And the other is the need for that, again, timely and predictable funding with supplemental funding as necessary for those enhanced presence things that we have to do as the nation's called the Army to do. For example, what you're seeing in Eastern Europe right now, as well as what's happening in the Central Command area of operations. So to me, those are two of the areas of greatest risk for the Army, and ensuring we've got the resources we need to take care of it, while also taking care of our soldiers, civilians, and their families.
Hey, good morning. My name is TJ Stapleton, Stapleton and Associates. Sir, what's the inflation hit on this budget? I mean, you've got essentially a flat budget. We know that inflation is a real issue. What do you think the inflation budget is on this budget and then going forward?
The budget was built using a 2.1%, what we call the GDP deflator. As you all seen out there, the CPI continues to change over time with that. So the as a part of a whole, how we calculate all those things, but the negative real growth that the Army experienced in this budget is minus 2.4% that I mentioned earlier. So that's the challenge again for the Army, again with that flat top line, again making it all fit in while doing the modernization as well as maintaining our readiness standards.
Hi, my name is Elena Monosmith. I'm from Case. We're a supplier. There were a few munitions programs listed on the previous slide. I was curious if there were any other munitions programs that might go into multi-year procurement.
At this stage, no. We're just looking after the GMLRS and the
PAC-3.
PAC-3. Excuse me.
Good question, though.
And this is for the panel as well. What areas do you think make the most improvement or impact in soldier quality of life in this budget request?
I think the pay raise clearly is obviously maintaining that on top of the largest pay raise we've seen in 30 years at 5.2%, the 4.5% important. The barracks, going after the barracks, improving those, that sustained level of investment. Again, the importance of doing that and sticking to our strategy and plan to get after that are the biggest improvements, I think, towards soldier quality of life. Family as well, not lost in there as well. We continue to pay attention there. Childcare improvements. We've got some pay raise for the actual workers in our childcare facilities, as well as we've got up to $1,800 per soldier, per child per month per soldier available in terms of fee assistance to enable those families that need some help there in paying childcare type bills. So very, very important programs as well, and taking care of our families as well as our soldiers. Thanks for asking, though.
Hello, sir. Thanks for coming today. Brian McCullough. I work at Lockheed Martin. 2 weeks ago, the chief mentioned standing up a deep sensing CFT to build off the lady's question. Probably too early for too much in the budget, but is there anything being looked at regarding that for next year? Thank you.
Well, too early to talk about what would go into that just yet, but definitely a lot of items in there. So I'll turn it over to.
So, and I guess some of the platforms that there's an investment in Hades, for example, that would be a logical fit in there. Some of the other intel systems, Titan, as an example, that would draw in different things, the Army Intelligence Data Platform, and other things. But I got to be cautious. I don't get too far ahead of the chief as far as what will come underneath the umbrella of the CFT deep sensing. But those would seem to be logical fits, and those are currently in the 25 budget. Yep.
Back here. Good morning. Hi, Scott Porter from Talus. Might be deep diving a little bit, but do you recall, is there any funding asked for Apache modernization, Apache E modernization?
There is some Apache funding in there. There's both RDT&E and PROC that go currently in there.
Specifically, $8.2 million in RDT&E tied to the oil-cooled generator development, and then there's $81 million for H-64 mods as well, included in 25 requests. Give you 2 examples.
And this is also for the panel. We've heard a lot about the effort to increase the 155 millimeter production. Can you expand a little on what other investments the Army is making to improve the organic industrial base included in this budget?
Yeah, I can. The $1.9 billion in the base that I mentioned earlier is across quite a few of our facilities, to include the ammunition facilities, rather large, $641 million investment there across over, I think it's close to a half dozen facilities, to include Radford, Holston, those types of places to get after that. We've also got funding in production-based support, again, improving what we're doing out there to help us and keep moving our facilities towards 21st century type technology, as well as some safety measures as well that are important to making sure that we take care of our workforce.
Final questions? All right, let's give our panel a big round of applause.
We have them up here. Yeah, any more questions? We have them held hostage, for another 15 minutes. Okay. All right. I don't want to leave any unanswered questions out there on the floor. But if the panel could stick around, I'm sure there'll be some folks that want to come up and see you a little later. But thank you so much for a great discussion. You can take your seats if you'd like. Before we go, I'd like to inform you of a couple upcoming events. Next week, don't forget to register for the 2024 Global Force Symposium. It's the 26th to 28th of March in Huntsville, Alabama, for 3 days of education, networking, and business opportunities. On the 3rd of April, we have the Undersecretary of the Army, the Honorable Gabe Camarillo, that will be here for a coffee series. So 3 April for the Under. And then lastly, please join us if you can in Hawaii in May for the 2024 LAMPAC Symposium. It's the 14th to the 16th of May. Both housing and registration are now open. So for more information about these or any other events or to register, please visit our website at ausa.org. And finally, we'd like to thank all of you who support us with your membership. Your membership matters. We cannot do this without you. You help us support the Army. So thank you again for attending, and have a great Army Day.